Hi, welcome back to our channel. So we are going to review a book. This is my copy of it. It's really broken down because I actually got it in a used bookstore at the time. It was out of print. This was sort of like the last copy I was able to get my hands on. In the meantime, it's been reissued, so you shouldn't have a problem getting your hands on a copy if you would like to do that. Also, I'm going to link in the description box a online version of the book, which is free for you to download. And we are lucky because this is actually it's basically a transcript of a dialogue between two people. So, and the dialogue has actually been recorded at the time. So there's a audio recording to each chapter of the book, which I'm also going to link in the description box below. There's a total of 15 chapters. We will cover one chapter per video. And as I said on my community post yesterday, it's quite a huge undertaking because it's quite a philosophical and rather abstract conversation between two exceptionally intelligent people. So when I first stumbled upon this content, I actually tuned into the audio first. I listened back to the recordings again and again. And in the beginning, I have to admit, I didn't understand a thing, you know. I just somehow knew that excuse the background, the occasional banging. It's national holiday here in this country, so people are doing the firework thing all day long today, unfortunately. So anyway, when I started listening to it, I just sort of knew that this was important for me to spend time with, you know. And despite the difficulties I had in the beginning, I just somehow trusted that I would be able to wrap my head around the concepts at some point in time. And I started appreciating the dialogue, you know, on a lot of different levels. First of all, as I said, you know, it's a dialogue between two exceptionally intelligent people. One of them, he was Indian, Krishnamurti, and I'm not going to, you know, talk a lot about the bios of these people. You know, you can just Google them. But basically, he was a spiritual leader, you know, and he all his life worked on spiritual concepts. He held a lot of talks, you know. He would travel mostly India, but then he later on lived in California, and he, I think, built even a school, you know, for the thoughts that he laid down. And the other person, David Bohm, was a physicist, and he was actually one of the founders, if you will, of quantum physics. So, and that in itself is really exceptional, to have a dialogue between seemingly two very different strands of thought, but then to realize that essentially they arrive, you know, at similar points through their studies. So that was a revelation in itself. The other thing I appreciate was that they are completely different type of people, you know. While Jiddu Krishnamurti comes more from a experience type of view, you know, of his personal experience of things, you know, in terms of spiritual experience. David Bohm was much more the science kind of guy, you know, operating on logic and being really precise with his terms, you know, and being really precise about, you know, clarifying concepts and whatever they were talking about. He would always sort of take a step back and clarify what Krishnamurti just touched upon. Krishnamurti, on the other hand, would jump around, you know, from like one concept to the next, and wouldn't really care about clarifying things so much. So they worked quite well together, I thought, or I still think they did. And the third thing, obviously, was the topics themselves, you know, that they covered. I found that, or I came to the realization, you know, that it's just another way, like this dialogue is another way for you to access the sort of the essence of what I'm trying to convey with this channel, or with my side of the channel, because of course there's always Linus as well. Is that, you know, in my opinion, the most important sort of concept to grasp while alive, while being a human being, is that the ego, or the sense of I-ness or me-ness, is really nothing but a concept. And that in itself is huge, you know, and we don't have enough time to cover, you know, we can't even get started with covering all the aspects of what that means. But so this book is another sort of pathway for you to get into the, you know, into that kind of train of thought. And I was thinking about, obviously, how to convey, you know, this book chapter by chapter, and what I did is I went through the dialogue myself. I took notes, so today we're going to cover 8 pages of notes. And I understand if this turns out to be too difficult, too hard, you know, for you to follow. But anyway, since I'm going to do this review for myself anyway, you know, I was going to review the book in detail for myself and take notes. I thought I might as well cover this in a couple of videos. So if there's anyone out there interested in it, I might get you interested in it as well. So let's so about how to convey the content. I pretty much do, or did, what I always do when I encounter books like that. You know, I try to break things down in you know, in arguments, because I had somewhat of philosophical training in university. I can't say I'm a philosopher, really. I can't claim that, because I never got a degree or anything like that. And I understand that, you know, if I was to claim this is a philosophical review, I couldn't really, because I'm probably not you know, harsh enough with my structuring of the arguments made. But still, I'm trying to sort of emulate the philosophical approach, which is to really, you know, approach a text by reading it and then reading it again and then reading it a third time, and really sort of start breaking down the arguments, like what is a hypothesis, where is a question asked, what answer is given, you know. And I will sometimes also provide short excerpts in terms of, you know, the actual conversation. So what I thought I would do is I would whenever I do cover a short excerpt, in order for you to understand who's speaking, I'm going to put little thumbnails of Krishnamurti is going to be on my right side and David Bohm on my left, so you always know who's talking while I'm giving you the excerpt of the conversation. So let's just see how this goes, you know. I mean, this is the first time, obviously, I'm doing this, and I hope it's going to work one way or another. So let's get started. I'm going to be looking down a lot in this video, obviously, because I'm reading off of my notes, because there's no way for me to memorize all that stuff. So forgive me for that. So we start with the hypothesis that humanity has taken a wrong turn a long time ago. Now, just for your information, you know, in a philosophical discussion, basically you can assert anything you want, as long as you treat it as a hypothesis, you know. I mean, I could tell you the sky is green, which would be my first hypothesis, and then I would have to follow it up with more hypotheses or arguments, if you will, in order to make my point. So it's just a way of, you know, doing thought experiments. It allows you to think, you know, and it allows you to develop trains of thought. So let's not get hung up on whether anything can be deemed true, you know, or not for the time being. Let's just treat them as hypotheses, really. So the first one is that humanity has taken a wrong turn a long time ago, followed up by mankind has always tried to become something. I mean, from where we stand right now, you know, at this actual point in time, we could say there's some truth to both of those statements, really. I mean, we're far from perfect. The state of the world is pretty dire, I'd say, right now, and I don't think anybody could refute that we've always tried to become something or other. Then, subsequently, a distinction between outward and inner becoming is made. Because if you say mankind has always tried to become something, you can distinguish between outward becoming, which, you know, is linked to obvious things such as, you know, discovering new tools, techniques, developing technology, improving living standards and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, inward becoming is linked with, you know, wanting to become something better than what one is at the time. So that's what we start out with. The dialogue then starts to focus solely on inward becoming. And another hypothesis is made, which is the notion of becoming implies that thoughts of wanting to become something are being projected into the future. And that rings true, you know, to me anyway, is that when human beings try to become something, they must have some idea, you know, of what they want to become, and that idea is being projected into the future. So insofar as such projection is taking place, inward becoming requires time. That seems logical as well. In what follows, this kind of time will be referred to as psychological time, or extending time inwardly. And that's to distinguish, you know, that kind of time that they were talking about from the time it requires to move an object from A to B, you know, in space-time. So we're concentrating on inward becoming, and we're concentrated on psychological time. Another hypothesis. Becoming implies a contradiction. a contradiction between what is and what should be. And such contradiction harbors conflict. And now we are moving to, I think, a first very important hypothesis, and that is this kind of becoming builds up a center, an egoistic center from which a person can project thought into the future. The construction of this egoistic center, an ego, a sense of I-ness, causes conflict. So the origin of conflict is the ego, the me, the I. If there is no ego, there is no problem, there is no conflict, there is no time in the sense of becoming or not becoming. What follows is the question, why has the brain created the sense of me or I in the first place? Two answers are given. A, we need a certain sense of identity to function. This is equated with the outer aspects of someone's existence. An example is given. I have to identify with the family, the house, the trade or profession. All this gradually becomes me, you know. And the second reason why the brain creates such a sense of me or I is the brain cannot handle vast, limitless energy. Now, this is important because this energy references an experience that Krishnamurti claims to have had, in which he experienced a state of non-duality or singularity, a state of freedom of thought, freedom of time, freedom of becoming, a singularity that he describes to be vast and limitless energy. Okay. Krishnamurti goes on to explain that the cessation of all movement, so the stopping of all movement, whether that be outward or inward, is the source of all energy, i.e. the point of access to that kind of energy that he alludes to, you know, via having had this experience that he had. In this context, meditation is mentioned, and it is claimed that true meditation means not trying consciously to become, to reach a level. That's really interesting. Now let's refer to our first short excerpt of the actual conversation to clarify that point. One night in India, I woke up. It was 12:15. I looked at the watch, and I hesitate to say this because it sounds extravagant. The source of all energy had been reached. And that had an extraordinary effect on the brain. Also, physically, I'm sorry to talk about myself, but you know, you understand, literally, there was no division at all. No sense of the world, of me, you follow? Only this sense of a tremendous source of energy. So the brain was in contact with this source of energy? Yes. And as I have been talking for 60 years, I would like others to reach this. Not to reach it, you know what I'm saying. All our problems are solved because it is pure energy from the very beginning of time. Now, how am I, not I, you understand, how is one, not to teach, not to help, not to push, but how is one to say, this way leads to a complete sense of peace, of love. I'm sorry to use all these words, but suppose you have come to this point and your brain itself is throbbing with it. How would you help another? You understand? Help, not words. How would you help another to come to that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yes. My brain, but not mine, has evolved. Evolution implies time. And it can only think, live in time. Now, for the brain to deny time is a tremendous activity. For any problem that arises, any question is immediately solved. Is this situation sustained, or is it only for a period? It is sustained, obviously, otherwise there is no point in it. It is not sporadic or intermittent. Now, how are you to open the door? How are you to help another say, look, we have been going in the wrong direction. There is only non-movement. And if movement stops, everything will be correct. Well, it's hard to know beforehand if everything is going to be correct. Let's go back to what we began with. That is, has mankind taken a wrong turn? Psychologically, not physically. Can the turn be completely reversed or stopped? My brain is so accustomed to this evolutionary idea that I will become something, I will gain something, that I must have more knowledge and so on. Can that brain suddenly realize that there is no such thing as time? And that short excerpt is quite interesting because I think it really sums up, you know, what people feel who reach that type of consciousness. When they do, they are so excited, you know, they're so filled with excitement and with just peace and with feelings of joy and love that they want to share with their fellow humans. But when they do, they're mostly just looked at, you know, this person's crazy, you know. And it sort of sums up that it's almost impossible, you know, to even talk about these things. Because if you think about it, when you say the ego or the sense of I-ness or me-ness is the source of all conflict, is the source of all our problems, you know, you still have to use language to get that point across. And that very language you're using relies on a basic structure of each sentence being subject, verb, object. So the subject is you are talking, you know. So by the very talking, you're sort of cannibalizing your own statement, you see. So even using language to get that point across seems impossible. But anyway, let's move on. So next, we are presented with a series of hypotheses that try to distinguish mind from brain and their possible relationship. So the first hypothesis is that the mind is not originating in the brain, meaning it's not an epiphenomenon of the brain, you know. And we have to realize that, I guess it's safe to say that we're still, you know, living in a time where the materialist, the paradigm of the materialist is still prevalent. So we could safely assume that, you know, most of current science says that, you know, matter is first, is primary, and everything else, such as, you know, thought, emotion, mind, and all that kind of stuff, emerges out of matter. Okay, so it's an epiphenomenon of material things. And that statement made here, the mind is not originating in the brain, obviously runs counter to that paradigm. The second statement that is made is the mind is not time, meaning the mind is not constricted to or bound to time. The third one, the mind does not evolve with the brain. So you can't refute evolution of material things such as the brain. The brain has evolved, you know, over a long period of time from, if we follow Darwin's theory, from, you know, some kind of, human beings developed from some kind of ape to their, you know, actual state today. So the mind does not evolve with the brain postulates that it's somehow separate from, you know, that material vessel, which is the brain. Albeit the brain might evolve over time, the mind doesn't. The fourth statement is the mind operates without time. And that also is a huge statement, you know. And there, I've been referencing another Indian quantum physicist, Amit Goswami. I've been referencing him a lot, and his theory pretty much plays into that a great deal. You know, he says that basically he calls the human brain the mind brain, and he does that because he wants to say that yes, we do have a brain that is physical, that is material, you know, that evolves over time, but there seems to be something accessible to us. And here's the limitation of language again, because if I say something, that's completely wrong. It's not a thing, you know. But there seems to be mind, you know, and mind operates or is able to somehow operate outside of time, meaning outside of the dimension of time-space. And Goswami explains this via quantum physics, quantum phenomena, you know. And if you're interested in that, you can go back to my series, my playlist, that's called, wait, what is it called? The Human Condition. I talk a lot about that there. So that fourth statement is the mind operates without time. And the fifth statement is the brain is unable to operate without time. Okay, so we start distinguishing mind from brain, and we say that brain is material, it evolves, it is couched in time, or in time-space, if you will, by it being material, you know, and it is therefore bound by time, you know. But there's a second sort of instance, if you will, and that is mind. And mind is not material. Mind is not originated from matter, so it doesn't originate in the brain. Mind is somehow not bound to time, it's outside of time. And that's pretty much the summary of these 5 arguments here. Now, these clarifications were needed because Krishnamurti and Bohm are still trying to figure out if there is a way out of that identification with the ego, you know, what can bring this about, and how someone who has entered the state of non-duality or singularity could inform someone else who is not in that state, of consciousness yet. So those clarifications, those statements sort of serve the purpose to answer that question. So 2 more hypotheses are made now in this first chapter, and that is the brain is not being completely conditioned or dominated by time, so there is a part of the brain that is free of time. So they're trying to open a door, you know, through which could explain why some people, you know, are able to reach a higher state of consciousness. The second hypothesis being there's a chance for the brain to step out of time and to realize the source of all conflict. Now, if that is so, another question arises. And that question is, what is the factor that will make the brain realize this, you know? What is, even if there's such a door, you know, what's the factor that triggers you realizing that there is such a door, that there is a way to escape ego and I-ness and me-ness? And that allows humans to realize that in their having a brain, they're trapped in time, you know. So a lot of possible answers are given and sort of discussed shortly. One of them being pressure, coercion, reward, punishment, drugs, fasting, austerity, poverty, chastity, purity. But, none of these answers or none of these triggers seem to turn the tide. And if we think about why that is, then two reasons are given. None of these outward stimuli or goals work because they still involve becoming. Remember how we started out with saying, we sort of approached the problem we approached the source of conflict by saying mankind has always tried to become something, and we said we focus on inner becoming. So none of these triggers, seem to work because they still are part of becoming, And the second reason that is given is the brain, or rather the ego, has a tendency to resist such realization. And that's quite a scary concept, but I think there's reason to believe that this is so, because if you regard the brain as a rather, let's say, self-preserving kind of system, it would want to sustain itself, and it almost develops its own kind of authority, So whenever that authority is being challenged, it would make sense for the brain to want to resist, any kind of trigger that would sort of threaten its authority. So if you think about it, if the goal of religion, and that's my own thoughts now intermixed, so if the goal of religion or spirituality was to get over ego or over the sense of I-ness or me-ness, it seems that by adopting some doctrine, by following a set of rules, one seeks to improve oneself, to become a better version of oneself. And that means you only fortify the sense of ego, And one could argue you only exchange the regular ego with spiritual ego. And I mean, you don't have to, go far. You could just turn to any type of religious or spiritual authority. It doesn't even have to be an authority, just any type of religious or spiritual person, whatever tradition or whatever religion, or whatever system they follow, whatever doctrine, they tend to develop, just a sense of pride, I would say, and they tend to adopt whatever they believe in, and then they tend to exclude, whoever doesn't believe in that same thing. So it's just an embellishment of ego, really. It's an embellishment of I-ness, of me-ness, It's nothing more, I guess. It happens a lot of times. So next, an attempt to a way out of this conundrum is given. And for that, let's look at another short excerpt. To go further, one has to deny the very notion of time in the sense of looking forward to the future, and deny all the past. Time is the enemy. Meet it and go beyond it. Deny that it has an independent existence. You see, I think we have the impression that time exists independently of us. We are in the stream of time, and therefore it would seem absurd for us to deny it, because that is what we are. Yes, quite. So it means really moving away. Again, this is only words. from everything man has put together as a means of timelessness. Can we say that none of the method that man uses outwardly is going to free the mind of time? Absolutely. But how can you convey it to another? I think you can only convey it to someone who has gone through it. So then, what are we doing? As that cannot be conveyed through words, what is a man to do? Would you say that to resolve a problem as it arises, you have to go into it immediately? Because otherwise you may do the most foolish thing and delude yourself that you have resolved it. Suppose I have a problem, any psychological problem. Can the mind resolve it immediately? Not deceive itself, not resist it, you understand? But face it and end it? Yes, if we could bring this immediate action to bear on the problem, which is the self. Because any action which is not immediate has already brought in time. The ending of time is immediate, right? Now, this is an important point because the immediacy is introduced, and by your definition, you know, time requires a period, you know, a period of time. It has a beginning, then it runs and it ends. Whereas immediacy is immediate. It's like a metaphor, bolt of lightning, you know, it's a enlightenment, it's immediate, it's sudden, you know, it doesn't require time. So what it means is that there is no way to think your way out of ego consciousness, because thinking requires time, you see. Because thought is a process which is based on the notion of time. And David Bohm specifies what kind of thought they are talking about when he says, let me make it clear that you are talking of thought which is aimed at the mind, whose content is the order of the mind. So, when mind starts pondering itself, you know, there's basically what they're saying is that's no way out of ego consciousness, you know. Then a subsequent section discusses the term knowledge, and for clarification, I thought let's review another short excerpt. All knowledge is time. Yes, in that it has been known and may project into the future and so on. Of course, the future, the past, knowledge, science, mathematics, whatever it is acquired through time. I read this or that, and the whole movement of knowledge involves time. I think we're saying that man has taken a wrong turn and got caught in this kind of knowledge, which is dominated by time because it has become psychological knowledge. Yes, so he lives in time. He lives in time because he has attempted to produce knowledge of the nature of the mind. Are you saying that there is no real knowledge of the mind? Would you put it that way? The moment you use the word knowledge, it implies time. Then a distinction between knowledge and the mind and knowledge as experience or skill acquisition is made, and I think that's important. This harks back to the discussion between inner and outer becoming that we had in the beginning of this video. And the conclusion is drawn that the value of time is limited to a certain direction or area, and beyond that it has no value. To clarify this point, let's review another short excerpt. I understand the totality of knowledge is me. is time. So then, what is existence without this? There is no time, there is no knowledge in the psychological sense, no sense of me. Then what is there? To come to that point, most people would say, what a horror this is. Yes, because it seems there would be nothing. Nothing. But if one has come to that point, what is there? Would you say because there is nothing, it is everything? Yes, I would accept that. I know that. That is true. It has all. No meditation, nothing. No thing. No thing, that's right. A thing is limited, and this is not a thing because there are no limits. At least it has everything in potential. See, we come back to the point that thingness, implies materiality, implies extension, it implies space, and it therefore implies time. It's another crucial statement as it starts linking the concept of energy to potentiality, moreover. When we spoke of what Krishnamurti claims to have experienced, that type of energy that is vast and all-encompassing and instant, not extended in time. They are now making the bridge to that energy being potentiality, in that it holds all the possibilities, It is not manifest yet, so it's infinite potentiality. So, again, this is another crucial statement as it starts linking the concept of energy to potentiality and thingness or reification to time. If you cross-reference that with quantum physics, we can compare it with the limitless potential of any quantum system or wave function before the moment of observation or collapse of the wave function. Now that's an intercept of that is me talking now, because I realize that there is this, when you bridge that type of energy with the concept of potentiality, that's sort of like the link to quantum physics right there. And that is pretty much what Amit Goswami is covering in his work as well. So next, the state of singularity or no-thingness is equated with energy. If it is nothing, and so everything is energy. And the question arises if there is a source to this energy, which is out of time, which essentially is the question for God, a creator, a first mover. That's, if you say that in that instance where you have this realization, in that instance where that door opens, where you have access to that kind of consciousness, which is out of time, which is equal to energy, pure potentiality, which is equal to no thing, like no material thing, and therefore everything like in potential, the question is that God? And if that is God, has there been a start to that type of energy, or has it always been there? Which is really hard for us to wrap our heads around, because we're so bound to the concept of time, something being caused, something starting, something lasting a while, and something ending at some point. Next, the question is picked up why the I or ego arises within that energy and why it thinks of itself as independent of that energy. And I think that's crucial, you know. So if you sort of agree with all what that's been discussed so far, and you say, well, yes, it's entirely possible that, you know, there's basically, there just is energy, there's potentiality, and you know, and it just so happens that, you know, that potentiality, that wave function collapses every once in a while, and something materialistic, something of matter is being created, and that thing is in space-time, you know. But other than that, things are out of space-time and independent of it. So, you know, the question why ego or I-ness or me-ness would arise in the first place is a valid one, you know. Why would it, really? And here I want to give another short excerpt, and that will actually lead to the end of this video today. The I encloses itself and says, I am different, I am eternal. Why has it done this? Why has the separation arisen? Is it because outwardly I identify with a house and so on, and that identification has moved inwardly? Yes. And the second point was that once we established the notion of something inward, then it became necessary to protect that, and therefore that built up the separation. Does it mean then that there is only the organism, which is part of energy? There is no me at all, except the passport name and form, otherwise nothing. And therefore there is everything, and therefore all is energy. Yes, the form has no independent existence. Now, end of excerpt. This sentence, the form has no independent existence, that in itself is huge. Because what it says is that, yes, there are physical bodies, you know, of human beings, for example, that seemingly are separate from each other, but as they all are in energy, and since the idea of an I or me is just a concept and nothing more, there is no independent existence from energy, and therefore from each other, because we all are in energy. So I was jumping a little bit ahead of myself before when I said that was the last excerpt, because now let's come to the last excerpt, I promise, and then we're done for today, because this is a beautiful passage. Has mankind journeyed through millennia to come to this, that I am nothing and therefore I am everything and all energy? Well, it can't be the end, in the sense that it might be the beginning. Yes, so the ending is a beginning. But what is that? Beginning implies time also. Not necessarily. I think we said that there could be a movement which has no time. Then what takes place? What is happening? Not to me, not to my brain. What is happening? We have said that when one denies time, there is nothing. After this long talk, nothing means everything. Everything is energy, and we have stopped there. But that isn't the end. No. That is not the end. Then what is going on? Is that creation? Yes, something like that. So, congratulations to each and everyone who's lasted so long till the end of this video. Thank you for hanging in there, and I will do my very best in summarizing the next chapters, the following chapters, like that. Now, I was thinking, if you want to get your hands on those notes, I have to think of a way to obviously post them somewhere in the World Wide Web. I don't have a website myself, and I'm not really good with technology, so any hint on how to share the notes with you would be appreciated. Just put it in the comments, and if you want, check out the link in the description box to the actual recording of this first chapter, listen back to it and just, you know, let it sink in. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.